expired.
Thank you, Senator Rosen. We'll turn to Senator Marshall.
I thank the chair and welcome as well. I think my first question, as potentially to be the Deputy Secretary, Department of Labor, your state of California, like our state of Kansas, really struggled with fraud in the unemployment insurance. Really struggled, continue to struggle. What lessons did we learn, and what was the cause of it? And in your new leadership, what would you do to help stop the fraud?
Thank you so much, Senator. So, yes, I think what I've described is really a perfect storm during this pandemic of very high demand for benefits on the heels of very low levels of unemployment, which in the UI world translates into very low levels of staffing. And then on top of that, infrastructure and capacity issues. And I think all of those provide important lessons. And then on top of that, we have to layer what you mentioned. I know you experienced it in your state. We did in ours, of course, and it really hit state after state, the fraud, the criminal enterprise type of fraud, right? I think it's so important to understand just the scope and the scale and the relentlessness of the kind of fraud that we faced, which is a different animal, really, than what the unemployment insurance system was built to prevent. I will answer this question with what I think are four basic lessons. The first is, I talked about earlier, is I do think that the Department of Labor's consistent and clear guidance about what the states need to do to implement benefits programs, especially new benefits programs at the federal level that have not been in place before, is really critical. That kind of guidance has to come out timely, and it has to be clear, and it has to be, and it has to stay consistent. The second is those investments in infrastructure. And by this, I mean technology, but not just technology. In fact, in many of the states where technology upgrades have been made, they were still hit by the kinds of fraud schemes that we're talking about. So it's the ability to create a flexible, reliable system that works, but that is also nimble enough to respond to what we've seen over the last year. The third is that I think that we need a coordinated response to the fraud that recognizes that it was a national problem. It has been called the biggest fraud scheme in United States history. It is a national threat, and it needs to be responded to with a national response. Now, it should be done as a federal-state partnership, but the states have struggled against significant odds to process the unprecedented volume of claims and to implement new federal programs, and I think would welcome that kind of partnership with the federal government. And the last piece I would just say is we still have to pay attention to equity in all of this, right? We saw that the pandemic disproportionately hit African American, Latino workers, Pacific Islander workers, women workers, and our unemployment insurance benefits system has to be aware of and responsive to those kinds of needs. And it applies also to rural workers.
I need to move on to the next question, if you don't mind. So thank you for that answer. Our state of Kansas, our governor also struggled mightily getting out the unemployment insurance benefits. It's the #1 complaint we get from Kansans, typically still getting 15 complaints a day. Story after story, people crying and call and say, look, we don't have money to pay for our electricity, enough money to go get groceries, waiting on those unemployment checks still. So here's fraud happening. The people that need it aren't getting it. Would you add anything else to what you would do to improve that situation as well, other than the 4 points you already made?
I just, I agree. I think that was the challenge. And I think that understanding the multiple reasons why that happened, but your point is that, there is a sort of a tension, right, between paying benefits out quickly to those who need them and stopping the fraud. And the unemployment insurance system is a constant effort to make sure that we do both of those things well. I would say that the priorities that I raised, but other ideas that I know this committee is likely to have based on the multiple experiences in your state, I would very much welcome conversations about how we tackle it.
Okay, next I just want to go really at a high level, like at least a 20,000-foot high level, maybe even higher. Right now, employers are trying to figure out how to make a safe work environment with COVID. And we realize the science is not settled. The science is never settled, that with viruses, the only predictability about them is that they're unpredictable. We've been told to wear no mask, 1 mask, 2 masks. We've been told to have our kids 3 foot apart, 6 foot apart. And the truth is we don't know, that we're shooting from the hip. The science is really a stretch for the most part. but your guidance to employers is going to have a huge impact. Like you set the gold standard, you set the bar. This is what an employer needs to do. Just kind of describe how you look at that situation, maybe not real specifically, but just what rules will guide you, your values. Yeah.
So I think that's right, Senator. We have to be based on science. We have to be based on our evolving understanding of the virus that we face. And I agree with you that that is why as clear of guidance as we can put out so that employers know what they need to do to keep their employees safe, but also themselves, right? To keep it's required in order for them to keep their business operating. It's very important for us to be based in science and then to make sure that we are doing as much outreach as we can so that employers understand their obligations. And then, as I talked about earlier, creating tools for employers who are struggling to comply to do so.
Yeah, my point I'm trying to make is there's not good science. And you try to apply the science, but the science we're getting now is not the gospel. Half of it's wrong. I just don't know which half. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. Senator Hickenlooper.
Nomination to be, sorry about that. I'm